Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Gene Keys transit of March, full moon 13, on the 13th. That's for Pacific timing of the US. So I always recommend doing at least one version of this for somebody local, right? Because it does shift just a tiny bit. And we'll see that actually in um, our next moon, our next new moon. We will have two different keys in play in the U.S. One for Eastern, one for Pacific. So I can only talk about one, so I'm going to be talking about Pacific, unless there's like a mass protest, then maybe I'll change to Eastern. But either way, you just kind of want to know because if it isn't you now, it's coming or has been, right? So it's going to come through the zones, all in around about the same time frame. So, shadow of conflict, gift of diplomacy, and city of peace. That is our Gene Key 6 for March 13th, full moon, also eclipse. So we're also in eclipse season. Now, again, like what you consider the eclipse energy depends on where you are. So the eclipse energy is at the peak eclipse of the time at hand. And right now it's peaking at gate 6. So we have the right one, Pacific, we have the right one. It's the same energy that's going to be coming through for the eclipse, for the, well, I'm not sure about the equinox. I'll have to check on that. But yeah, I'd have to check on that. But yeah, so it's good to know. It's good to know this is an important time of the year because it's this energy of the eclipse that is part of a 6 month movement of energy. So it gives us our larger cycles around the full moon and new moon cycles, right? So it's always good to kind of check in where you were about 6 months ago if you're really into this stuff when we had the new moon in Virgo. Okay, little astrology info for you guys that like that kind of stuff. But here we are in this gate 6 on the human design chart. So if you're into body graphs, that's from the center of emotion to the sacral, that engine, that internal engine, right? That we have in the body graph. And what that basically means is how our emotions drive our our way of being. In other words, how I like to think of like just our impetus, our motivation, or our energy to do. So that is part of it, and it's the ring of alchemy. It's the channel of fruitfulness. We are most fruitful when we are working together, right? You have that idea, and yeah, so many powerful things. Sandal completion is in 59. Again, this is mostly like little astrology sprinkles for those who are into the deeper information of astrology. So, what I love about this is it's talking about the ring of alchemy, right? This is the codon ring of alchemy with the amino acid glycine. And this is actually how the DNA functions in our body. And it is the functionality within that codon ring of being able to break out of conflict or to break into conflict. So they have that shadow of conflict and then the gift that the conflict, or we also in the Gene Keys call the shadow the key, right? It's the key to being able to understand what it takes to have true diplomacy, right? And then the city is what I call the how the energy serves as a whole if everybody's participating with the same level of consciousness awareness, right? So this is about this is a direct quote from our lovely Richard Rudd's Gene Key book. The trauma pattern comes from, quote, conflict breaking out whenever two or more people agree to identify with their emotional state. So, like, you know how you understand things intellectually and then you live a life experience that helps you to realize exactly how it functions, right? You have an experience that gives you an awareness of how that actually plays out in real time. Well, this often happens to us. Anything that has to do with like kind of a feminine and masculine duality energy, with a strong lean into what it takes to balance that, especially with a strong lean for emotion. I always go through it with my husband. It's just one of these dynamics we have, right? So we had an argument just to show us what this looks like and have a real experience so we can apply it in a real way moving forward, right? And what I what I didn't see in that quote before I had the actual real life experience is the word agree. All right. So I'm going to back up and say it again. Conflict breaks out whenever two or more people agree to identify with their emotional state. So it takes two to agree that the emotion has to serve over the culmination, how we want things to turn out, or how we really feel, even. And so there's a lot of duality aspects. So if you want some comparisons, you can think of duality of war, what it takes to have a conflict between two states, right? The war of sexes. So again, masculine and feminine, the feeling that we have to naturally have an aggressive stance or a combative stance. And the science versus religion idea also. I like to go through different elements of just how we structure ourselves as humans. And one of them is our belief systems. And so some people believe that faith needs to be tested, and some people believe that you just believe, right? I'm not going to say, like, that's a big conversation, so I'll leave that there. Biofeedback, that's what this is meant to do. So that whenever we're having a trauma pattern, it's not just out of like, the universe trying to make your life hard, right? Right. It's about its natural function that allows us to have an evolutionary experience without us having full, omniscience, which is interesting because we just had that, or that we will have that in the new moon eclipse. That's one of the words for the gene keys. So yeah, yeah. It's a big dynamic that's teaching us over a 6-month period how we can better show up to differences of emotion and opinion, that creates emotion, which we had opinion as a shadow of um, last new moon, right? So how does that play a role in how we're being emotionally? And then is it actually working against us in a way that conflict can also harm you? You can also get hurt if you get into a physical conflict. You can get hurt if you get emotional into emotional fray without any kind of balance or resource or awareness, right? So yeah, so it's this idea of this constant biofeedback loop of nervousness causing us to be continually defensive, because that's just the background of like human life as a whole at this time, right? And then what's causing the defensiveness, what's causing the lack of trust is that biofeedback loop. It's this idea that our emotions are more important than how we want to live together, right? Because it's that duality, not just one, there's two, right? Are we going to live together? So, what it's meant to do in the higher consciousness and vibration when it lives its next evolution is it creates diversity. Well, I should say, like it started out, and the first evolution of that was for us to have a diverse cultures, countries, ideas, art, right? It all counts. And we wouldn't have the amazing diversity we would have without this energy of conflict. All right. What is that? Why? Because it gives us a some would say, healthy respect for difference, right? So it gives us a sense that, oh, we're not quite the same. I can't just assume that the same rules apply to those other people. So I have to have some level of understanding of difference, of duality, right? It's the same for sexes. It's the same for masculine and feminine, right? So we have this idea of what it means to be masculine and the idea that it means to be feminine. And we've been taught one or the other is more right. And that goes across the board, regardless of like kind of our self-identification beyond gender, right? We just have an idea of how that looks, how that goes, who do we believe, who do we trust, and they may be conflicting beliefs, but we usually have a place to go for our given argument at any given time, right? So there's that piece. But what it's meant to do is to balance the polarities, which is what I kind of jumped into earlier. So that balancing wouldn't be able to be possible if we had no sense that something needed to be balanced in the exchange of difference, right? And so this is the body's ability to be sensitive to pH balance. So, and then what does it feel it needs to do to maintain a healthy pH, right? And that can change again through evolutions or degradations of our health. So it's a very real thing. If anybody ever wants to know more, you can always get the book Gene Keys from Richard Rudd. It's just brilliant. Highly recommend it. And yeah, so that's what it's designed to do. So how do we live into this higher gift of diplomacy? This chapter is actually called The Path to Peace, or subtitled The Path to Peace, right? It's the ability to drop our defenses when we are sensing that somebody isn't the same as us, right? So it helps us understand what projections we are actually creating within our emotional selves based on what we have been taught about that difference, right? It's bringing awareness to those that are still unconscious so we can lift ourselves back into awareness and then see how we were perceiving something because we were perceiving a difference, right? And then returning energy with nothing added is another concept I brought out of the book. But this idea of like, if you've ever heard of different Tai Chi moves where it's not just about hitting the other person, right? You're just returning the energy, right, that they are giving to you. So if they're being attacking, then you just return that energy of attack without adding anything to it. You just accept the reality of what's happening and then redirect the energy, right? And so it's just really like it's healthy to know if you're really being attacked or if it's just a difference that's perceived from a previous belief, right? That's really useful. But in order to fully live this gift, we have to allow our boundaries to dissolve enough to let the other in. Okay, so it's dissolving those boundaries to create a new idea of balance or new truth of balance. So we have that. So how I think of this when we're connecting, like I think that connection with self is our first responsibility in relationship. And so with ourself, it can be the idea of our good girl and our bad girl, and the idea of the differences within us. Like when I work hard, I'm being good. When I'm having a lot of fun, there must be something bad happening, right? Whatever those previous beliefs are, we always going to have a duality version of that. That's why some of the self-work is about embracing both sides of that there's a good time to be a bad girl and there's a good time to be a good girl. And it's not like to make you less valuable to be acting like either one, right? Taking the charge out of it. So we have that for ourselves and our relationships. This is about like how are we perceiving the difference? What do we think is different about them? And then like pH testing to see what would actually create the right level of balance for your integrity to be intact and for their integrity to be intact within the way you're reacting and interacting with them, right? So good stuff, right? Now, Karen Curry Parker is my second person I like to bring in because I do talk about human design. And I think if you're going to study human design, a great person to study with is Karen Curry Parker. She created the quantum human design system. And in her system, gate 6 is labeled impact. So it's how we actually make an impact. And I love this because, she's called herself in the past the feminine version of human design. It just has a more nurturing way of bringing you into the information. And I love that in that reflection, in that perspective, she chooses the word impact because it's saying that you have the most capacity to impact when you have a clear idea of what your emotions are up to and how they're playing out for ultimate results. Just brilliant, right? So, emotional regulation during disturbance is what she focuses on. So, that's how she thinks of it. Can you And that's also in Richard Rudd's book, by the way. This is one of those that are very close, but just have different words associated. So, can you, in your full height of emotion, still be able to perceive in awareness? That's a big ask, right? So, when you're in the middle of the argument and you're just trying to make the point that would make you feel better, are you willing to drop that point in order to complete the argument? Or are you going to just keep arguing? And with groups, like when we're dealing with different racial groups and we're dealing with just people that we've been taught are other, then it's really having that understanding that, okay, I have to be open in order to even perceive fully what's at hand. Who am I learning about? What's going to be different about this person interaction and this interplay as we all work together? In bigger groups, that means there's more balancing, more rebalancing happen, right? So this is another recommendation from Karen Curry Parker is to recognize divine timing. So Richard Rudd doesn't talk about this as much, not in this chapter, but I think this is important. This is something that came up for me intuitively around this energy, and it's that saying things at the right time. It's just like it's not always the time to share everything. And when we go into the shadow dualities of repressive energy and reactive energy in the archetype of 6, right? Um, you'll hear me more. So let's move on to that one. So the repressive is over attentive, and this is from the Gene Keys. The repressive is over attentive, maintaining peace regardless of the cost to your person, to your family, to you, right? So this is the idea really of people pleasing. So guess who probably has a little bit more of that? People who were taught that they were supposed to please people, right? And what it will breed in the imbalance is a sense of resentment, of feeling like somebody owes you something that was never stated or agreed upon, right? So if you know anybody like that, do you know anybody who like people that like to please and then get a little annoyed when your value is not honored? Anybody? I don't know. That could be me. I don't know. So that's the repressive side. That's when we're holding that energy back, but it is existing in our framework. The reactive side is tactless. So it's the people that can't have emotional tact, can't because they can't manage their emotion or share emotion when balanced, right? So you might have experienced this with other people or yourself by a tendency to blame the emotion, like whatever emotion is strong or being accused of or being tossed back and forth. What that you say like, oh, that wasn't mine, that's theirs, that's not my fault. It's not my fault, right? So you tend to like this is the definition of projection. This is that, right? Because of the way I feel, I'm gonna label you as feeling a certain way, being a certain way, having a certain like ideal or truth, but that may not at all be relevant. It's just a projection of the way you feel, right? So this is why, Karen Curry Parker's like emotional regulation. That's the name of the game. You got to get yourself together if you're going to be impactful, right? I love that only because I think a lot of people just toss that out with the bathwater like it's nothing, but it's literally my work. It's your ability to manage your own stress, emotions, and energy, and therefore in the higher levels you start managing your intuition, what you're bringing in, what you're you know filtering, having that as just a truth of the way you are, an entrainment into your nervous system and physicality, not just something that you're putting on to look you know the right way of whatever for however you're showing up in your life for business, right? So for my legacy business, wonderful peoples, whether it's a legacy business or event, I think of them very similarly because they're both containers, right? So, and they all require the same kind of perspectives to manage the container. And so I think of this as different sections or departments of a company. So the departments we'll be talking about today are HR, marketing, and sales. The departments on hand, besides that, are finance, management, fulfillment of customer service, R&D, or education if you're a solopreneur like me. So all of those things are factors, and I like to apply it to real life so you can go out there and be a better you and have more joy in your life, right? So here we are, HR, what I see and hear and how the energy plays out in the environment of managing your human resources is that in the conflict, people take sides depending on how they feel. Not usually not based on much fact, because they're people make really snap decisions in corporate environments because that's rewarded, right? So they're just going off of whatever energy was already in play. And however that is just the reactive emotional pattern, right? So that's making the decisions for them. And the whole point of HR is to be the place of impact. Like that's the point. The point of being resourceful with the humans in your experience is that everybody is doing the part that they're doing to make the whole that much better. So if we're taking sides, it creates things like not believing somebody's job is as important, not believing a different kind of person is as important. And then we have these conflicts of, am I doing what my boss told me to do because they're more important, or am I honoring what this person has already offered and given to this work, right? And are we having full conversations that are recognizing the value of both, so that we're recognizing input as valuable, but not as a reason to take sides, right? And that's a big concept, but I feel like it's so applicable. If like I think that's directly applicable to the politics going on today. I've had so many conversations lately about how people are perceiving things, and it's always coming down to this dynamic. No big surprise, this is eclipse energy for the year, right? Marketing is the next department, so we're going to get in there. So the question I have for you around your marketing of how you're sharing the event, or how you're sharing your work, or your dream, or your vision, or your business, are you ready to open up to your customers? This is a deep one. I think this is like I do think there's a readiness. There's a divine timing for the level of vulnerability, transparency that you have. And part of that is just being true to yourself and honoring the level of how much you want to be vulnerable for your own sense of strength and safety, and so that you can be in full self-expression at the point that you're at, right? You don't have to be, screaming on a mass stage in front of 10,000 in order for you to be effectively full self-expression, right? You have a version that's perfect for you in this now moment. So I just felt like I had to say that. I had to say that. And then the third one is sales. So this is deep, y'all. What I have here as my quote is backing away from emotional conflict in favor of a dishonest peace. So that one just got kind of downloaded for me when I was writing this up for you guys. And if you go back to the repressive version of over-attentiveness and people-pleasing, right? A sales conversation isn't that time, right? Because what you're doing is you're sharing what you find important and valuable. And if you don't, if we're not taking that stance as a clear, that's what's different, you may not agree with me yet, or maybe you will, right? Or maybe you do. We don't really know, but we're in our emotions, we're just assuming that you must not get it or that you must not feel the way I feel, right? Uh, and so instead of saying that they're wrong or that, and I'm not saying to say they're wrong, but instead of saying that you believe differently, holding your stance in the truth of what you value, and then asking them if they're meeting you in that truth or pursuit of the ideal or idea, then we lose the opportunity to work together towards the goal, right? And so it's actually a little dishonest because the truth is, you probably wouldn't have been going through all the work that got you to that moment of having the conversation if you didn't want to have that relationship, that connection to continue. Like if you didn't want that, then you wouldn't have done all the work to get them there, right? So when we drop that ball, we're basically saying in favor of them thinking that I agree with exactly what they agree with, so we can be friends forever and ever, amen. And so instead of sharing that and living in that place of really not honoring what I truly believe and truly want, which is also valuable, right? Then that's fine. So that point of tension is actually the point of balance. The opportunity is balance is available for balance, whether that is in them seeing the truth of your ideal and agreeing with you, right? Or in that full no, right? And in the clarity of your truth, it's not for me. And our avoidance of that no is usually a really big lost opportunity for connection. Is that also if like somebody's not comfortable telling you no, I mean, that can also be just a personal way of being for them. But you might not have given them enough cue that you can say yes or no. You don't have to agree with me. I just believe you should, right? But the truth is, you believe they should, right? So if you're backing off of that truth, then it's a dishonest piece. Now, if they leave there knowing, I think you should do this, I know what you think, I'm willing for you to have your own opinion. But the truth, like if they don't know very clearly that you believe that they should do it, whether that's because you would enjoy working with them or they have great potential, whatever your reason is, all of it's fine. Like that's what they need to know before they leave. And they can still say no. And that ability to just know how you feel, even if it's really strongly, and still be with your guard down. I'm willing to tell you how much I want you. Have you ever seen how this happens in like romantic relationships? Because now it's so much, better to be cool and not to be thirsty I'm sure they're not using that word anymore, but that's around the time when it became really obvious that people were afraid for other people to think that they really wanted to be with them. But that's like a place that you have to go if you want to be in a full, loving, open, trusting, intimate relationship, right? And so that's true. If you want to be in a full, transparent, loving connection with the people that you're working with, you have to be honest with where you're at, how you feel, what you value. Okay? So that's our little piece for the full moon in Virgo. Hope you love it. And I will see you the next time. Oh, if you don't know, Vocal Alchemy is still open for new people. Vocal Alchemy is still open for new people. I always forget to mention these things, so I'm going to throw this in at the end. I'll put the link in the description. And yes, and then there'll be other events that will be announced. So even if you don't sign up for Vocal Alchemy, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get to know what's available, what the packages are for the month, so that you can decide if you're a yes or a no. Okay, I will see you guys next time.